All right, welcome back.
And you to close your eyes without...
We want to continue pace with the conversation right now. KRA pressure on landlords signal fresh rent increases. Taxman tax issue with rent stagnant for years. Property owners required to pay 7.5% of gross rent. And we just read some of the excerpt here, which bears repeating for your understanding. The Kenya Revenue Authority is expressing discomfort with the landlords whose rental income has remained unchanged for years, signaling a push for rent increases. In notices sent out to landlords last month, the taxman took issue with property owners declaring constant figures of rental income and asked them to ensure their rents are in line with market changes. That story is on page 3 of the Business Daily this morning. Patrick, let me just begin with you because you had a punch there that the KRA is lazy. Maybe you will want to expound.
Yeah, I said KRA is lazy for the fact that they're trying to get other people to do the work for them. So, and before I come to this, is going back to what Bill said earlier on about this going after directors. Directors are individuals, and you're trying to get the directors to make sure that a company is doing a certain thing by going after them individually and threatening them. That's not the right way to go. If you suspect that a company has got issues, go after that company and do your job and go in and investigate. Yeah? But if the directors are compliant, does that mean the company is compliant? No, not necessarily. Yeah? And trying to bring all these things in, as part of saying, oh no, we really want to make sure the company is okay, is not right. What they're looking at, and again, this is another way I'm saying they're disingenuous in this, they're trying to force me to give them information about myself. Yeah?
Indeed.
So that in the event that, why should they ask me for a tax clearance certificate? I mean, pay my taxes. Yeah? If they have a problem with me, they should come to me and say, you have got a problem as a director of a company X. Correct. They shouldn't ask the company to go and look for me, to go and get me to get a tax clearance certificate so that they can see it. They can see it anyway. It's in their system. Why do I have to get it? If I don't have one, they just say you don't have one. And then I can go and argue with them. But why should they force a company to come to Patrick Obath to go and look for a tax clearance certificate, which is in the iTax system anyway? That's why I'm saying KRA is lazy. Very, very lazy. Yeah? And coming back to this issue on landlords.
Yeah, before we even come back there to the issue of landlords, where is it? Where do we draw the demarcation line? If you're a limited company, so to speak, and we know maybe they should not really. Okay, you've been listed as a director. I don't know. Yeah. But where do you draw the line of the limited company and my privacy as maybe a director? Because even if I'm a director, if you're coming to me as a person in a different, let's say, as an employed or a businessman with other jurisdiction not associated with this company, it should be treated differently. Absolutely. Because what you're doing here as a director affects also your output in the other enterprise maybe that you're involved in. Where do you draw that particular demarcation line?
As a director in a company, you have a fiduciary
and a limited company.
A limited company, you've got fiduciary and regulatory responsibilities.
Indeed.
Right?
Yeah.
To make sure that company does what it's supposed to do in accordance with the shareholders' wishes, etc., etc. So that is where it stops. I have company B, which has also got its own directors and shareholders, and you have a fiduciary responsibility for that. I sit on the board of an NGO and I sit on the board of a listed company. The requirements for those two are completely different. So as I sit as a director in each of them, I exercise my directorship in an NGO based on the NGO Act and the requirements of KRA, etc., etc. So all these bodies that this particular company must comply with, I make sure that company complies with that. That is my role as a director. And I make sure that the leadership, the management of that company and everything else does that.
But you see, Patrick, even if I am not compliant as a director, that KRA should not punish the company if it's compliant.
Yeah.
So you cannot frustrate the business of the company simply because me, one of the directors, I have an issue of KRA that has not been resolved. my personal tax returns or my other business, whatever.
Which is personal, which is not the company.
Not the company. Which is personal, yes.
That's what I'm saying.
Or which has got some other business, which is. But this particular enterprise has everything. It has complied. But I am going to lose business because I must, because of the other director. So this is what we're saying. It really doesn't.
This confusion,
KRA is just trying to use that to sort of mulika people, right? When their systems should do that. The iTax system is a great system, but they're not using it to its full capacity. They're not using technology, and they're not expanding the use of technology to be able to trace what I need. Or if they want information for me, they can get it. Yeah. There's a lot of, and I think this is where Shem will probably come in, a lot of organizations are employing artificial intelligence, right? You can gather so much data about Patrick Obat's lifestyle and everything else purely by looking at the transactions I do on Google, I do on this, whatever it is, and so forth, and then you give me a risk rating as a taxpayer. You can do things like that very quickly. And once you've done that one, and you see that Bilo is a high tax risk, then you deal with them based on their tax, on their tax rating. Is KRA too lazy to get involved in putting systems that can make them do that work? And here they come asking Patrick Obat to go and get a tax certificate from its own system to give it back to them. I mean, I find that, let me not choose the word I was going to use, but I find it imbecile.
You've used the word.
I find it's imbecile completely. Yeah, and it becomes. I mean, it makes KRA a laughing stock in a lot of instances. Yeah, and people then begin to give them names and everything else. That these guys come and all they do is they place they place an assessment on you purely because the officials want money from you as an organization. Those things begin to create a story, and they begin to create a narrative about KRA as an organization. And I hope the leadership in KRA sees this, because what they're doing is creating a negative narrative about KRA with all these things they're doing. KRA needs to create a positive image about itself. And there was a time when it was beginning to happen, and some I don't know, they've gone the other way completely. I think during the tenure of Waweru, Michael Waweru, it changed completely, and KRAs began to have a sort of a positive vibe with the people. But the way it's going now is just going the other way. And I pay all my taxes, I do everything else, but I'm not happy. I'm not happy as a taxpayer.
Started with Tangerine,
Tangerine. Yeah.
They'll become punitive.
Yeah.
And the charter is very clear. They should be focusing on facilitating business more than regulatory. But there should be a balance.
Yeah.
But if you just focus on assuming everybody is a thief, and just think of punitive way of handling people, you can't.
So coming back to this landlords issue that you're talking about, I mean, landlords, and it follows on from what I'm saying. If KRA is not being seen as friendly, and one that is, that wants people to pay tax, and you can see the outcome of tax and everything else, people will begin to find devious, ways of hiding rent and whatever it is, and KRA will see that the tax has been the same for the last 10 years. Why isn't this guy increasing his rent? Yeah, because the minute you're increasing rent for what? Yeah, giving more tax for what? So most of the people who are landlords and are just saying, okay, fine, I will keep my rent at the same thing, but I'll probably get them to pay certain other things which would have increased the rent, but I increase in other areas which is not rent, because rent I have to pay tax on. But there are other service charges within the building that I can increase, which is not part of rent. Yeah, and
because you touch on rent, also maybe you lose tenants, right?
Yeah,
and then
but you can do other service charges, which are things that you are adding in terms of value. Maybe you've added the CCTV, you've added this, you've added that, and all the rest of it, and you put that up on the cost, and the CCTV pays for itself in 1 year. After that, you're collecting money, which is now new rent, and the rent is going up, your collection is going up, but you've done it purely by adding services, value-added services, which then increases the rent from that direction. Yeah, and I think it's just that if KRA begins to talk like this, that the landlords are not increasing rent, is that their business?
Yeah, is it their business in the first place?
I'm a business person. I'm running my whatever. So that's what I'm saying. I mean, it just paints the organization in a very, very bad in a very bad place.
Right, and we also saw that prior to this, we had drones that will be hovering now around
cameras.
And cameras around your building. You saw that? I mean, that was one of the suggestions, so that we can see how many the tenancy and what the activities. The drones. I remember the drones. So maybe those efforts are not really working out at the end of the day. So that's why
our two colleagues who have spoken are people who can speak right from real experience, and of course they live it. They are into business and so on, and I hear them and I appreciate their points of view, definitely. However, just this week, was it last week, what happened at Cusco? The directors of Cusco had fleeced the company to several billions worth.
5 billion.
Yes. But me, somebody turned aside.
5 billion or 500 million?
No, to 6.2 billion.
6.2 billion.
For 7 or 9 directors. So there is, mankind has many devious ways of getting around. However, this debate we have around what limited liability should imply, the rights of that corporate entity and its directors and so on, is a live issue. In nearly all countries, they're always pushing back, pushing forth, and so on. And I would hope that in these utterances, there is an inner core which will seek to get a gain on how accurately KRA is assessing what the taxes should be. And the interests on the other side will be pushing back. I think that I would take that as a normal thing in the course of business. KRA will realize we have overstepped the line, let us pull back a bit, or we left this a little slack, let us get it in. It's a continuous learning and developing thing, and technology helps to make that guesswork more scientific and more accurate. So it will hurt. You may pick the wrong persons for sure, and you must learn lessons from that. It's very difficult to win against KRAs around the world, but they will quietly let you go by. They make mistakes and they are sued, and they will not openly agree, but they can provide some relief quietly as they go forward. So that push and pull, I think, is usual. It's a normal thing of how this side of business is managed. And as I said, the Cusco one recently is quite illustrative. Lastly, there's been a lot of emphasis on declaration of wealth. You might remember in the old days, you would simply sign on something and sign it and take it in. This time, there must have been somebody somewhere who was actually reviewing line items in it. Oh, for your wife, you didn't put anything for your wife here. Please include something for your wife. After you put it in, it doesn't speak to the story of what you have said here and so on. They're really beginning to look at it tightly. So I think, in my view, that the balance out of this will be a step forward. Each side realizing what opportunities there are to seek gain on the other side. And I think that's what development is all about.
All right. Shemo Cholo.
Now that we've bashed KRA enough, I think also sometimes Kenyans need to understand KRA. I often ask, why is it that we just have a revenue authority but not an expenditure authority? In the sense that, because Kenyans ordinarily believe when Kenyans pay tax and they don't get services, obviously the first person they want to hold it against is KRA, despite the fact that KRA's mandate is only to collect. So maybe that's something that is worth looking at. But I fully agree with my colleagues. One, let as many, first of all, facilitate, enable businesses. Unless businesses thrive, then they can't pay tax. I remember this joke of somebody saying, look, can government just keep all our money but give us the tax? Meaning tax itself is already so punitive. Obviously, Kenyans are some of the most highly taxed people. Secondly, related to it, is the aspect of trust. In a situation where there is trust, I often use this example, the experience I had in Yemen, where you go to a shop, you buy a cloth, and then the shopkeeper says, if you don't have money now, you can come back next month and pay. There's so much trust. I'm asking myself, I'm leaving this country next week. How does this guy know I'll be here next month to come back and pay? But there is the level of trust and integrity and values that apply within that society. So it's a society that's our values are broken, whereby you have to fully scrutinize whatever little things that people do. But I also, in the third respect, agree that technology has many ways to enable in this regard. I do know, for example, there are countries that check if XYZ declares this is what they have, but they have children studying abroad and they live large. How is it that that's happening? And through artificial intelligence, it's all possible to capture this information. So it's very unfair, Debal, to punish a body corporate, a company, for the ills of a director who may even deliberately choose. Not every director means well to a given company, and not all directors would always be unanimous in what they want to do. Good governance demands that there is majoritarian rule, but it doesn't mean everybody agrees with doing things in a certain way. You may find a director who chooses this is my opportunity to make life difficult for this company. So I think if the problem is a director as an individual, go for that director. If the problem is the company, as a body corporate, go for that.
Go for the company.
And technology is there to make it possible. Lastly, technology is an enabler and simplifier of things. One shouldn't be sweating. I don't want to share experiences of a company filing records, taxes, and the pain that you go through, even as tech savvy as I am, or some of my people are. So it should be simplified, and the technology is to make it simple. And they don't have to be expensive.
Indeed. Now, the Auditor General has raised concern over the loss of 1.3 billion shillings annually that the Kenya Pipeline Company, KPC, pays the moribund Kenya Petroleum Refineries Limited, KPRL, for jobs not done in the fiscal year 2021-2022. The auditor questioned why KPC was paying the amount to the company, which ceased operation about 10 years ago. The Parliament ordered the Energy Cabinet Secretary to dissolve KPRL before the end of this year to stop further losses of public funds. The payment of 1.3 billion shillings annually for the use of its storage facilities, which were meant to, to renew or to renovate the petroleum products, is unnecessary, considering the country currently imports refined products, not crude oil. And this is what they say: we urge the minister in charge to expedite the dissolution of the KPRL and its Mombasa oil storage tanks and employees handed over to KPC. This is what David Kuksing, chairperson of the Public Investment Committee on Commercial and Energy Affairs, said. That is, to store oil products, the KPC has been attempting to obtain 45 storage tanks in Changamwe, Mombasa, which are owned by KPRL and have a capacity of 484 million litres. Speaking on the sidelines of a sitting by the committee in Mombasa, where MPs are examining the Kenya Pipeline Company's audited accounts for 2020, 2021 and 2021-2022, Kusing said once the KPRL is fully dissolved, the funds can be channeled to subsidies or subsidized fuel prices, since there is no justification for paying such an amount of money. This eye-popping figure, we begin with you, Patrick Obath. We can talk about also... yes, this is really right up your alley. The question is, I think what was the last time we were actually talking about a company that has actually been having money stashed away in the banks, 2.5 billion shillings since 2011. I can't remember the company. And we're just talking about these monies.
That was Kura.
It was Kera. It was Kera, yes. Just because I think it's the same scenario that we're having.
No, I don't think it's the same scenario.
It's not the same scenario.
KPRL was a limited liability company in its own right, where the government had 50% shareholding, and the others had 50% shareholding as well. The private sector had 50% shareholding. Yeah, and that has always been the structure for KPRL for years. And it was one which was on the basis that everything had to be by consensus. That was a 50-50. And the private investors did not want the government to override what they were going to say. So that was a very nice setup that they had. Obviously, things got tough for KPRL, and it is still structured that way. There's still an ownership, but also the company carries liabilities from its past operations. And I think that's the key thing that a lot of people do not understand. That land where KPRL sits, and it has a lot of land. I think it's almost 300 acres in the middle of a city is not a small amount of land. That land has got historical issues that need to be cleared before it can be released for normal work. Since it was shut down, it's got facilities that are what in the technical world is called mothballed. Mothballed, yeah. They are, you put mothballs. Yeah, when you put clothes somewhere, you put mothballs in there to avoid further deterioration from insects. So the facility is exactly the same. It's been mothballed. But even once it is mothballed, you still have to keep certain things going. There's an operational cost within a mothballed organization.
Okay.
And then you now had its operations when it was turned into a tank farm, and they had to modify a lot of those tanks to receive new product. Because operating as a refinery, you have tanks for different intermediate products, finished products, raw materials, everything else. But right now, they're only importing finished products. But you also remember they had to go through a phase where they had to pay to change the tanks to receive this crude oil that was coming from Lokicha, and they kept it for export. So that was all money that they had to recover from somewhere. And that was where KPC then came in to pay that money, right? So that money that they've been paying to KPRL has got a reason for it to be paid. It's not as though it was a loss. But keeping KPRL as it is a cost that will be there so long as the assets are not being utilized 100%. I think the Auditor General is quite right that the companies need to come together, and they have come together, by the way.
Yes.
I think 2 years ago they actually did that. So this audit is before that happened, and the government realized. So now KPC has fully taken over KPRL, and it's now part of KPC, and now they can begin to optimize and rationalize the facilities they have. There's still the structures from the refinery that are sitting there. My view is knock them down, sell them for scrap, and use that place for other things. Because so long as it's kept there in that particular form, they have to spend a lot of money making sure that they're safe. And I don't think it's money that will be well spent by the government. So the Auditor General is right for 2019, 2020, or whatever period it was. At that time, there was two separate organizations, and one was paying a service fee to the other one, which is correct if you got two separate organizations. Put them together, that has happened, and now I hope the government and KPC will actually turn that place into a facility that will actually be earning money for this country. There's 300 acres plus that could actually be used for a lot of stuff. And I hope I haven't let the cat out of the bag so people start looking at that place for different issues. Land is a very emotive thing.
Right, but that even the share of the transfer of KPRL to KPC had questions. 40 billion shillings on it as well. These were raising questions when we had the cabinet's nod and approval for it.
You know this KP is because I was also in petroleum.
Yes.
And you know that company still has our money, Patrick.
KPRL.
Even your former company and all that, because the refinery was very inefficient. So we would import crude oil, and in processing the yields are not what is agreed upon.
Yeah.
And so at any one time, there is a huge amount of losses that companies were. This is why we moved away actually too. And the government then eventually concessioned it to ISAR, the Indian company.
Yes.
And
ISAR bought out the private
sector.
So it became the private sector.
ISAR then did not live up to its obligation in terms of investment that was required into the refinery, or upgrading it. They just made money and walked away out of it. But I think the main issue is when Cabinet last year, July, voted to hand over KPRL to KPC, just to get KPC to borrow some 40 billion or something. You remember?
Yes.
That's where the issue is. KPC wants to borrow some money. And that borrowing money is for some pipeline repairs or whatever. This is where the big boys are interested in. And so I said, why don't you use these assets of Kenya KPRL? This is how the story came in. But you see, I remember one of the member of parliament for the area at the time raising concern that, look, this property is sitting on a land that the community gave the government those days for Kenya, for the oil refinery. You cannot just wake up and say we are handing over this thing at zero value
to KPC.
Which KPC has been listed by this same government to be sold. So you want to sell it, you are giving it an asset, a company worth hundreds of billions. So you see where these things are going.
Yeah.
So
it's very convoluted.
So there's a lot that is hidden in this.
So this is the historical land issue you're talking about.
Yeah.
It's not historical.
Yes, it is. the area
were allocated by the government to the joint venture that time was called Consolidated Refinery Limited. That's when it started off. BP, Shell, Caltex, and Esso, 4 companies together, started the refinery in 1959. And they were given and they paid for the land by the government at that time. It's before independence. And that area was in the middle of nowhere at that time. It was in the bush. You couldn't even see Mombasa from there. But obviously, Wananchi, the population, whatever it is, has spread such that it's now surrounded by people.
Patrick, you know what's going on in Rift Valley about the tea and then Muranga and all this?
Yeah,
the land taken by the Mzungu. You know those days?
Yes.
1959, nobody was 1 inch for public participation. You will just take the land the way you want.
Yeah.
So now the issue is, if the government is no longer using that land, should it not go back to its owners? Those people in Kachangaume now is one of the most crowded places.
It is the most crowded place.
Yeah, they're struggling to get land. And you want to give this thing to some company to collect a loan, and then you sell it, the company, to some other, so there's a concern really. Yeah.
So this is where we should be having the public participation, because this is a community land. It cannot just be taken from KPRL.
You saw what's going on, the Brown takeover of that tea plantation.
Lipton.
The residents are saying the circles raised, we were ready to buy it. Why do you sell it to Sri Lanka?
Yeah. Public participation in situations like this is fairly complex because people will be seized of what's happening currently and perhaps the historical thing, but the future is not usually well defined, and you can't have public participation unless there's clarity of the issues and so on. Yes, but you must allow fresh air into it. You must allow criticism that maybe will guide the process. And in these corporate arrangements, there are a lot of hidden things that go on. You want to sell, if you went straight to sell the 300 acres, the public contract will be very big. But if it's used as a collateral, and the new company goes and goes with the collateral, you've effectively sold it without going through public participation. So there are ways in which you can get around it.
It's a very slice slate of hand on how to get that 300 acre of land.
The Bal, I think there's quite a bit of information that we don't have. There are questions that could be asked from a business perspective. Does Kenya require a refinery, for example? Should government be involved in operating a refinery if Kenya needs one? If we were to privatize and commercialize, and by way of declaring interest, having been also in the petroleum sector before, I think there are some of those things, if only we could be prudent in the manner in which we do things, so that it's logical. Because if there is an asset there that could bring revenue to the government, is disposing of the land the best way to do it? I am not too sure. So there needs to be some technical studies done, and maybe even invite companies to bid to take it over, to co-run it with government. But having said that, the Balia, a number of things go wrong, have gone wrong in the energy sector that could be sorted out. Hopefully, I remember while on the KPC board, one of the things that had bad blood between us as a board and the Ministry of Energy was, I think, money that was being given to the ministry every month, 10 or 20 million shillings directly. And as a board, we were saying, no, but the Exchequer Act was very clear. I was saying any monies of government has to go to the Exchequer. But there was a circular at that time from, I think, head of public service previously. So there are certain things, I'm hoping that that practice has since stopped. But in terms of the assets at Kenya Petroleum Refineries, I really think that we need to, one, involve private sector, find out if there are, is it viable to have a refinery, is it needed, is it commercially required, and if so, can we competitively and openly bid, invite quotations so that we find a strategic partner.
But Patrick, do you think this...
I have to answer, Shem, I think the answer is very clear. Most successful countries who have oil, like we have, and have prudently managed it, have done it through a very simple system. They have the State Petroleum Corporation. And I'll give you just 4 of them. Petrobras in Brazil.
Sure.
I'll give you Kuwait in Kuwait. It's called Q8. Yeah? And then you have Petronas in Malaysia.
Right.
And then you have, I don't know what they call it, but the Thai National Oil, PTT. Yeah? Petroleum Thailand. Those 4 that I've talked about are started as oil corporations in their own countries and are now multinational corporations working elsewhere. And the simple thing they did was the government did not run those corporations. All they did in terms of improving the way that they grew was to bring in, they owned the assets, but they started doing joint ventures, specific joint ventures with people who came in for specific investments.
Right.
So like, for example, if you want to start a refinery, we don't do it ourselves. We get people who know how to do refineries. And they come and they do all the work and everything else. We say, okay, fine, you got the land. We are putting in this equity.
Sure.
That's a small amount of equity on a joint venture with them, and they put in the capital, and they operate is like a BOT or BOT, whatever it is.
Sure.
Right? And it costs the government minimal to do that. Petronas, as a global corporation, I think has got over 200 subsidiaries. And of those, I think 30% of them are actually in the country, in Malaysia. The balance, they've got joint ventures overseas. And those 30 in the country are all doing specific things which they should have been doing under the model we have now. KPC or KPRL or NOC would have been investing.
Sure.
But they put that all under one umbrella. And that is working perfectly for them. PTT has got the same, all these other, national oil companies that I'm talking about, the global ones, operate in exactly the same manner. I don't see why Kenya cannot do the same.
Sure.
You've got KPRL, you've got KPC, you've got National Oil, then you've got the Ministry of Energy running exploration, right? All those things should come under one umbrella, and then they're allowed to get into joint ventures where the money will come in for us to be able to do that. So I think this whole discussion around KPC doing this and KPRL doing this, we need to remove all those KKK, whatever it is, and have one big corporation that actually runs that in the country, and they're given their simple mandate, and you put the right people in that place to run it.
So the last time I checked as well, when you're talking about putting them under one umbrella, there was a question of the unbundling of the National Oil Corporation into 3 entities.
But that is part of exactly what I'm saying.
Yeah,
it's not being unbundled. National Oil is actually being the holding company, and it has 3 subsidiaries. So it's going exactly the right way. So they're actually, I think recently they talked about working with Rubis on the retail outlets. So that is going to be one joint venture that they're going to have, and that's going to be structured properly. So NOC is beginning to go the same way. Yeah? So that's the right way to go.
They haven't been
going. It's not unbundled. NOC is still NOC. It's still going to be the main.
Maybe the choice of word of unbundling is not the correct, but I think, it was being segmentized somehow.
It is being segmented so that you can now begin with each of those segments to be able to get into joint venture activities with other organizations. It's much easier. So they have a retail section, they have a midstream and a downstream. They have 3.
Yes.
Yeah. And each of those is now free to get into joint ventures. And they've done that exactly.
Thank you. So lastly, maybe this mothball operation.
Yeah.
Do you think 1 billion shillings is can be justified for the mothball operation?
I think for the previous period, it was not just mothballing, but they're actually having a throughput.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, so they're paying KPRL for the throughput of using their tanks. Yeah, that's what you normally do with an organization. When you're using my tanks, you pay me for the amount that flows through the place, and that 1 billion I think is both for throughput and also for the mothballing.
All right.
Yeah, that's
KPRL is dormant. There are no board of directors. There's nothing. So why would you pay money to?
There was a board of directors.
Is there?
Yes.
Really?
KPRL it may have been dormant, but it had a board. The board exists. So you have 1 billion is also to pay board fees and a killer kit.
Where does this really suit on the corporate governance structure?
Yeah. No, it's it's an inoperative company, but it's got a board that makes sure it stays inoperable, but in a fiduciary responsible manner.
Hey, below those mothball operations costs, they have to be discussed.
Are there moths?
I think there are moths in that place.
How many moths?
The mothballing costs are one set, but I said the throughput that they were paying as a fee from one company to another is what that thing is. Yeah. This KPRL was still operating the refinery in 2020, 2021 as a separate entity. Yeah, and therefore KPC to use it had to pay a fee. Like any other company that wants to store material there, you have to pay a fee to do that.
Fantastic. Yeah. All right, the government's re-entry into the domestic debt market, seeking 15 billion shillings tap sale for budgetary support, underscores Kenya's increasing reliance on short-term debt instruments to address pressing financial obligations. Tap sales, a method enabling borrowers to sell additional bonds from prior issues, play a pivotal role in securing short-term capital. And this strategic pivot towards short-term debt instruments by the National Treasury highlights the need for effective fiscal management amid the current economic landscape, economic growth. The Central Bank of Kenya is excited to offer, of course, it says there, investors the opportunity to participate in the tap sale on the Treasury bond issued number FXDI 2024-010. The bond dated 13th of May 2024 is part of Central Bank's commitment to fostering economic growth and stability, according to the CBK Director of Markets, emphasizing the dedication to economic resilience. Let me just hear from you, Bunyasi Sako, on this as well, on the tap sale. Yeah. It's a good opportunity for you as well.
Yeah, I think the raising money on the local market is, in the future, is a good thing. But of course, you always weigh whether you should do it domestic, do it foreign. But I think you also want to give an opportunity for local investors to be able to pick up instruments in which they can invest in, so that the capital markets begin to operate. And if they operate well over time, it's going to reduce the burden directly of each time, I guess, having to raise taxes to raise money, or having KRA to harass to collect more and so on. You can go to the market, get the money, use the money well, and then you're able to pay it back when the right time comes. So I think that, I don't know about the whether the actual figures, the quantum of 15 billion, that looked a bit small. In fact, they're making a big deal out of it, but I think that in the big order of things, that's not really a lot of money. And if you look at in Thursday's transactions on government paper, they exceed those kinds of monies from time to time. So I don't know why they have made a special issue on this one. But I think it's
and exceeded. I think it was 25. They actually collected around 38. Yes, it was oversubscribed. Yes.
And that happens all the time. You know, investors, if they are sort of a bit bullish about the economy longer term, they will hold off giving in money now, and committing for long. They want it short, so they wait to invest in the big way when the right time comes, or they're unsure and they say, okay, I can take it, but only for 30 days or 90 days, 91 days, or maybe 6 months at most. Out there, they downplay it, so you find that the longer term instruments are not subscribed fully. I think it's a good thing to double in the market. I even think that public institutions should bring themselves to a point at which they are able to raise money from the market. It requires a certain amount of discipline and clarity in the way they operate, so that they can get additional capital they need from the money market, instead of waiting for Treasury transfer and so on. But of course, the responsibility of the national finance managers, the CS and so on, is to say, are we better off borrowing locally at this moment in time, or should we be borrowing externally, depending on what the advantages are? They can give guidance on that, not by stopping it, but simply providing incentives or disincentives, and then people will decide which way to go.
Yeah, I think I agree with what he says, but I think for me the bigger picture is central bank. They have been struggling in the last 2 or 3 years to attract money in the bond market. This is why when this government came to power, the interest rates was around 8, or remember around 7 or 8, and the president saying, I will not allow it to go beyond 10, and this thing went up to 18%. It shows really, one, the desperation in the government to try and collect money, raise money because of the shortfalls in the revenue, and two, also that our institutional investors, the banks particularly, are very keen on making money on government rather than lending to industry, to the productive sectors of the economy. This has been the problem in this. I think what clearly the government is avoiding it, because the trend from the time Kibaki came in has been to shift from the short-term treasury
to the long-term
bills to long-term bonds, so that it can ease pressure on government. But they have been, I think, difficult. If you look at the last 3-4 months, they've not been getting enough, subscription to the. This is why probably I think they've shifted to short term. In my view, that could be the only reason. And they needed money because you're servicing huge loans. The expenditure is going up, significantly. So I think they are finding the need to get money in the short term rather than long term. But let me tell you, it's going to be costly. Short term is always more expensive than long term loans. So I think government needs to this just shift from policies, to a new policy without is not very good. I think the trend has always been in the last 20 years, I know, is to gradually move to long term. That would be the best thing for the government.
With the scenario of the pending bills, how are you guaranteed that even in the short term you can get back your money?
It's not just the pending bills, but I think there are
just many. With that likely scenario.
Yes.
Are we going to be getting promissory notes? Yeah, even with the short terms, that when you expect now to cash in on your money and with the interest that it has been promised, then you're given stories.
No, you see, it's if the government comes up with very innovative instruments, let me tell you, our capital market will take it up. That we have a very dynamic capital market, very strong. But the government has not really been very innovative in terms of coming up with their bet. It's not just if you just stick to the traditional, you're just enriching the banks, one segment of the society. You are not. He wants to buy something that the farmers want to buy onto something. There are many sectors of the economy that needs to buy into. But I think the government needs to be more, and this is what we were promised when when this government came in, that we are going to do a lot more to keep the bourse very active, but that's not the case. So whether it's promissory notes or whatever, but there are many ways in which you can deal with all those challenges of pending bills and many other similar challenges that the government has. It's not for lack of money. It's for lack of ideas, I think.
Thank you. Yeah. We need to close now.
In terms of the capital markets, I think some good things are happening. One, the market has been fairly bullish the past 1-2 months, I guess because of the stabilization of the Kenyan currency. The CMA has, I think, in the past 2 weeks licensed more than 10 new actors in the capital markets. And I am privy that the leadership of Nairobi Securities Exchange, the chair, and the new CEO were a compliment. They're coming up also with additional products. So I think it's looking positive, but of course, good governance is always required.
Right. I had hoped also you'll have talked about the UK overtaking Saudi in the diaspora remittance.
UK was my old home, having been a graduate student at York and also working there for British Telecom for a while. Yes, the remittances are looking up. I really need to figure out why Saudi is slowing down, because I am hoping that one of the Kenyans held there will be released. But yeah, I'm happy that UK is doing this, can do much more if we incentivize diasporas to bring in more revenue.
Thank you. Sako, your closing remarks?
Overall on this issue?
Overall.
Overall, yeah, okay. I think all I can say now is that we still, the deep end, that I think government has to seize every opportunity that increases efficiency, that controls expenditure down to focus areas, so that we can probably, the long term can be more stable, more predictable. And I think the Kenyan private sector is quite aggressive. They'll be able to bring in the resources that are needed. The current government effort to raise money internationally in various areas, including the green economy, is quite intense. So I think we are headed in areas in which we have to loosen up.
Thank you.
And stabilize the situation.
Thank you. Patrick Abath, briefly.
I think my thing is always around the government agility. We are in a world where there's a lot of changes, some of them from unexpected areas, especially because of climate change and the things that are happening around it. We are going to have a lot of surprises. The government must be structured to be agile so that they can respond quickly to changes in whatever happens, whether it is in issues of weather, climate change, whether it's issues to do with money markets, whether it's issues to do with internal politics and the economy. Agility, agility, agility. They have to structure to be agile.
Right, thank you. Bill Okiro.
Now, just wondering, you know, now you mentioned Saudi.
Right.
What I'm told by the Saudi government limits the number of professionals who can work in Saudi Arabia because of through the visa allocation. So there's a friend who lives there, and he says if you're a professional to get a job in Kenya, in Saudi, it's going to be very difficult because they don't give you the visa for professional. They only give visas to. I'm just wondering whether you have before.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Bilateral,
as always,
needs to take it up.
Thank you. Thank you. Always a treat. Looking forward every Thursday for this discussion. Thank you for your input. Really do appreciate. I can see we're pinched for time, but nonetheless, I want to thank you for coming through and just broadening our understanding on a raft of issues as far as the state of economy is concerned. This is Sokoni. Thank you for your valued company here on Morning Prime. News Diary is up next.